Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This one is going to be on the 8th grade unit 4.6. So be sure to write 8th 4.6 up here at the top so you can keep track of your unit notes. Okay, so this one is on writing equations in slope-intercept form. So we learned about graphing them, we've learned about slopes of a line. So let's see how we are going to write the equations when we have some information. So your learning intention is to graph linear equations in slope-intercept form. You'll know you're successful with this when you can find the slope and the y-intercept of a line, when you can use the slope and the y-intercept to write an equation of a line, and when you can write equations in slope-intercept form to solve real-life problems. Okay, so this should look familiar, this slope-intercept form. We've seen it in 4.4. And slope-intercept form is written as y equals mx plus b. And m is our slope, and b is our y-intercept. So let's see how we can do this. So writing equations in slope-intercept form. So you are going to write an equation in slope-intercept form of the line that passes through the given points. So there's two different ways that we're going to look at this. We're going to look at one, if you have the information from the graph. So if you've already plotted some points, the line is already there, we're going to see how do we get the information that we need to be able to write our equation. And then we're going to look at a table. Based on the information that we have on the table, how do we find what we need to be able to find our equation? Okay, so a couple tips that I want to share with you is that after writing an equation, check that the given points are solutions of the equation. So once you write your equation, make sure that you can go back and put that information back into either the graph or the table and it makes sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, then we've messed up somewhere along the way and we need to fix it. And then you can use any 2 points on a line to find the slope. So if there was more points here on this line, I could use whichever 2 I want. It's going to get me the same answer. It doesn't matter the distance that I go, because this is a linear line, which means that it's a straight line and it goes through both the y and the x-intercept, or x-axis, sorry. That means that it doesn't matter what points I choose, they're all going to get me the same slope. And that's the same with your table. So it doesn't matter which y and x that you choose when you do y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. It doesn't matter which points you choose, you're going to get the same slope answer. Okay, so don't get caught up on which one do I pick, where do I go, how do I do this? It doesn't matter. Okay, so now that we know those things, let's look at this first one. So I need to find the slope and the y-intercept. I have 2 options here. I can either just do I know that slope is my rise over my run. So I can just find that, which we see here. So here's our run and our rise. I know that this is going to end up being a negative because if I look at this line, I see that it's a negative slope. It is falling from the left to the right. So it's negative. So when I say my quote unquote rise, well, my rise is actually going down, right? Because it's not, the line is not going up. So this is going to be a negative. So if I went, you could either go this way and over or this way and over. This way is just a little bit easier for you to view. But you would know, you'd go 1, 2, 3. There's my rise, which is a negative 3 because I'm going down, and over 2. So over 2, down 3. So then I could write negative 3 over 2. Sometimes it doesn't always work out as easily. Like in the table, I don't have that visual. So I would do y sub 2 minus y sub 1 equals x sub 2 or over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So then I would have said 2 minus 5 over 2 minus 0. And that would have got me my negative 3 over 2, which is then my slope. Okay. Because the lines, so that's slope. I need to find a y-intercept. Because the line crosses the y-axis, so let's look. Here's our y-axis. Where does this line cross? It crosses right here at this point, and that point is 0, 5. So because the line crosses at the y-axis at 0, 5, so this is our x is 0, and then up 5 to the y, that means that our y-intercept is 5. because remember, our intercept, so our y-intercept and our x-intercept is where that line crosses the axis. So if this is our y-axis, we need to figure out where does that line cross. And in this case, it crosses right at 5. So that means our y-intercept is 5. So now we have our slope is -3/2, and we have our y-intercept as 5. So let's put it into our slope-intercept. So now we have y equals, what's our m? Well, we figured out that it's -3/2 times x plus, then we figured out our y-intercept is 5. So that's what it should say. Y equals -3/2x plus 5. Okay? So let's look at the next section. So this one is tables. Again, like I said, you can for sure pick any set of these points. So I could choose -3 and 0 and 7 and 6. I could choose 12 and 9 and 2 and 3. It does not matter because I am going to get the same answer no matter which one I choose. Okay, so I'm going to pick 2 of these points, and I'm going to do y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So I'm going to pick one of these points, so 12, and then I'm going to subtract it by 2. Or in this case, look, we already did 2 points. We did -3 minus 2, and then 0 minus 3. Okay, and then that's how we got 5/3. So because y equals -3 when x is 0, the y-intercept is going to be -3. So think about that for just a second. If your x is 0, and we're plotting these points 0, -3, let's say this is my graph, which is not going to be a great example because we don't have that quadrant. But so if my x is 0, that means it stays here, right? So we're staying on the y-axis, and I'm going to go down -1, -2, -3, and plot my point right there. That means that's going to be where my line first intersects the y-axis. So because x is 0, then that means that for sure that y is now going to be my y-intercept, because that is right where my line is going to intercept that y-axis. Okay, so that's going to be -3. So I have 5/3 as my slope, and I have -3 as my y-intercept. So an equation for this would now be y equals my mx plus b, which would be m is my slope, which is 5/3, plus -3. Or you could write it as y equals 5/3 x minus 3. So the reason that there's 2 different variations here is because it is highly important that you remember that that negative is part of your y-intercept. So if you write it as y equals 5/3 x minus 3, you need to keep in mind that when you are graphing this, that negative goes with your y-intercept. So if that's something that you think you're going to forget about, then you always need to write it as y equals mx plus b and just add plus minus 3 like we did here. So if that's something that you think that you're not going to be able to remember that that negative goes with the number, then make sure that you write it this way. But if you see it this way, because you will get problems where it's written in this format, you need to remember that that negative sign goes with the y-intercept. Okay, so let's flip it over and look at the back. Okay, so writing an equation, we're going to figure out which equation is shown in the graph. So it's either y equals -4, y equals -3, y equals 0, or y equals -3x. Okay, so we just talked back on this side that if my x is 0, then and my y is whatever number it is, that means that that's for sure going to be my y-intercept. So like this one, because y equals -3 when x equals 0, the y-intercept is -3. So then y equals -3 is going to be where my -3 was plotted on the y-axis. Okay, so let's look at this graph for a second. Another thing that I want you to know is when you see a horizontal or a vertical line, so that when it's either a 0 slope or an undefined slope, If you see that the y is the same for both points, or the x is the same for both points, then it's going to be, in this case, because my y is -4 on both, my answer is going to be y equals -4. If, say, my x was -3 and -3, which our line would not be horizontal at that point, but if it was, then it would be x equals -3. So if both y's or both x's have the same, then it's just going to be that letter equals that number, because it's going to end up being horizontal or a vertical line. But let's work this out for a second. So we're going to find the slope and the y-intercept. The line is horizontal. That should say horizontal. Sorry for my poor spelling. So the change in y is, because it's horizontal, we know that this is a 0 slope. So the change in y is 0. And we can also see this because we go -4 minus -4, which then would just be -4 plus 4, which is 0. And then 0 plus 3, or 0 minus -3, which would be 3, making our answer 0. So because the line crosses the y-axis at 0, -4, the y-intercept is, remember we said if it's here, where does it first cross the y-axis? That's what our y-intercept is. It crosses at -4. That means our y-intercept is -4. So the equation is y equals 0x plus -4. Or you could just say y equals -4, because what is 0 times any number? 0, right? So we can just kind of cancel these out, which just leaves us with y equals -4. So the correct answer up here for which equation is shown in the graph is A. Okay, so the graph of y equals A is a horizontal line that passes through 0, A. So A just means whatever that number for our y is going to be, but we don't always know the answer, so we just put in A for that. So you're going to try a couple of them here. They're going to be a positive slope, a negative slope, a horizontal slope, and a vertical slope, or an undefined and a 0 slope. So they're 4 different types of problems. You need to write an equation in slope-intercept form of the line that passes through the given point. So make sure you're writing the equation. And I want you to show your work on these you try it so that I can make sure that you understand what you're doing, okay? So once you're finished with this, make sure you get that turned in so that I can check it and mark it off for you. All right, have a good day.